If there's one thing I get asked more than anything else, it's what is the best drone for a beginner? Now, I'm not 100% sure which one is the best, but I definitely have found one which could pique your interest. It's under 250 grams and packs a bunch of features. But can it compete with the big boy, the behemoth DJI? Well, let's see if this little guy and all its features is actually any good. This is the Potensic Atom. Now I've got the Fly More pack and I'll show you what you get in the box a little bit later in the video, but for now, let's head down to my local beach.
It's a little breezy today, but I think it's nothing that this thing shouldn't handle.
Now I say that because on the box it says it has the trademarked powerful Surgefly flight control system, which gives you level 5 wind resistance, so it's got to be decent, right? Now, to be fair to the powerful Surge flight control system, or whatever it's called, it wasn't half bad. But one thing I do want to check out is actually how noisy this thing is going to be when it's flying.
Because I hate annoying people around me. I'm sure no one enjoys the sound of like a large humming bee in their ear. I like to find spots which are empty. I like to have drones that don't make a lot of noise and are not too intrusive. But that's just me. Maybe you're the super annoying person out there who loves doing that. I am definitely not one of those.
But first things first, let's get this thing in the air. And I have to say, it was pretty easy to start up for the very first time.
Doesn't sound too bad. I'll bring it a little bit closer. I think that sounds pretty good. Let's bring it in front. Woo. All right, so that sounds pretty good from like literally, like I don't want to stick my hand out any further. It's very much right in front of me, but it sounds pretty good. Doesn't sound too loud. It's a little bit of that high-pitched noise, but with all these small drones, you're gonna get that anyway.
And pretty much once you get about 10 to 15 meters away, you can't even hear it at all. When it comes to sensors, it looks like there's one on the front, but I think that's just there for future planning. Well, hopefully anyway. There's no safety sensors apart from the ones on the bottom, which main job is to actually keep the drone steady when hovering. Now, it may not look like it in this footage, but it actually is doing a half decent job.
Let's fly it out to the ocean.
So this is it, my first flight. And everything was going absolutely swimmingly until it wasn't. I'm about 50 meters in, and this is where I encountered the issue.
Oh my gosh. What is up with the signal here? It is just not happy.
So I'm going to show you my screen here so you can see exactly what I mean. You can see how it's just starting to jump and freeze on me and basically not give me any signal back to the remote. Now, I've had issues like this before on other drones, but never this close to the drone and never in spots like this. It usually happens when there's spaces that are covered with heaps of Wi-Fi signal, but I'm at the beach. There's really nothing happening here. So I reached out to Potensic to see if there was a known issue with the drone and see if we can get some troubleshooting done. And credit to Potensic because they replied very quickly, and I found out in the last line of the email that they sent me was where the issue was. By the way, are you surrounded by a 2.4 gigahertz devices, e.g. wireless mic, as this may also be the cause of interference? Now, if you look closely here before I started recording, you can see what I've just attached to my body. That, my friends, there is a 2.4 gigahertz wireless microphone. So it turns out it was actually my fault, which is generally the case. But anyway, let's get back to flying.
All right, let's fly it over the other side and see if we got better connection out there.
And oddly enough, out that way, I did get a better connection.
I'm facing the remote towards where the drone is. It's just generally going to get us better connection, at least to the drone. I'm going to take a photo directly into light. I want to see how well it does with the highlight roll-off.
So that's exactly what I did. I took a few photos and I put them back into Lightroom to see if I could give them a quick edit and just to see what the quality was like. Basically what I'm looking at here is the dynamic range and how well these RAW files can handle really bright spots plus some really dark spots. So if we put in a quick edit here, now this is just an auto edit and I've also left the peaking on so you can see these are the parts that are blown out. There's no information there, I'm not going to be able to get them back. But you can see here it's done a really good job with the highlights. It's toned them right back. Nothing is blown out there. It's nice and soft. The roll-off is actually quite nice as well. There doesn't seem to be a lot of harsh breaks in this. Slight little blowout there. But also in the shadows, you can see there's plenty of information. So we'll have another look
at some other photos. This is basically the raw. I just done a really quick edit, you know, kind of nice. And then if we look here, this is also the before and the after. So it comes up actually pretty nice. The colors are actually working pretty well. In terms of the detail that you get in there, it's not amazing, but I gotta say, for something of this size, they do pretty damn well. So with photos, generally speaking, they retain a lot more information, but when it comes to video, it's a little bit of a different story. And if we have a look at this video here, and if I just freeze it here, you can have a look at the dynamic range after a quick edit. There's a lot more highlights that are blown out and a lot more shadows that are just not recoverable. And if we zoom into 200%, you can see the whitewash. It's just completely no information in there. And in the rocks, it's very dark. There's no information there either. I also want to point out that I'm actually flying in the late afternoon. It's kind of getting close to golden hour. Drones that have sensors at this size, you kind of need a sunny, really sunny day. It's the only way the sensors get enough light. And kind of like your phone camera, I guess, you really want it to be nice and bright if you want the crispiest video and photo you can get. It is pretty from above here though, I will say that. Encountering strong wind, please lower the flight altitude, which is always a good idea. So it's nice to get those little tips on your screen. Sometimes they're a little bit annoying. I think you can turn the tips off, but I think as a beginner, I think it's important to have tips like that.
It's also important not to freak out when your drone gives you a message like that. They're there to help you. And some of the messages and tips that are coming up, just like here you see on the screen, they're not actually warnings, they're just tips to help you fly better. If there's ever a time you should be worried, it's when you take off for land. Those are the times you're probably going to most run into issues.
Let's enjoy this together.
Now, even though drones will land themselves, it's important to keep an eye on it and give it a little adjustment if you need to.
I think if I didn't move that at the last minute, it would have landed on the edge of the table.
So after one day of flying, I think my impressions so far are pretty good. And while the photos have been pretty good so far, the video I'm a little bit critical of, but there are ways of getting the best out of the video, which I'll go through a little bit later in the video. But for now, I do want to go take it out for another flight.
Okay, so I've got no wireless microphone today. I've just got my microphone on top of the camera. I'm hoping there is zero interference and hopefully we get a nice strong signal from the drone to the remote.
And wouldn't you know it, we had a great signal. It was like night and day. You can see from the screen recording here, I'm almost 1,000 meters from the drone. There's 30 satellites connected, great RC connection, beautiful image coming through on the feed. Now I'm going to do something that's completely unfair. It's so completely unfair that I tossed up whether or not I should even include it in this video, but I'm going to put this Potensic Atom drone up against my DJI Mavic 3 Cine. Now, for those that don't know a lot about drones, the DJI Mavic 3 Cine is one of the best drones you can get on the market. So you can understand why this test would be so completely unfair. But who bloody cares? I know a DJI Mavic Mini 2 or Mini 3 probably would have been a more appropriate test. But I don't have either of those, so I think it'll be fun to put it up against a drone that's almost 20 times the price. So let's just go ahead and do that. So I've put the Atom footage on the left and the DJI footage on the right, and the first thing you'll notice is the sharpness. You can see there's a lot of software sharpening happening in the back end of the Atom, which is common for drones of this size, and the DJI just doesn't have that. The other thing you'll notice is the colors coming out of the Atom are actually half decent straight out of camera. Now the next thing I want you to look at is the whitewash. You can see here in the DJI footage, it's not blown out at all. There's lots of detail in there. And when we zoom in at 200%, you can just see the detail just carries a little bit better in the DJI. But I have to say, at almost 20 times cheaper the price, you have to be pretty impressed with the image that's coming out of the Atom. Okay, so let's have a look at the build quality and what you get inside the Fly More pack. It comes with a really handy carry case and an eye patch, or a carry strap. The remote, just like everything else in the pack, is very well built. It's kind of like that hard plasticky type of material. I will say it's probably on the larger side once your device sits inside it. Considering how small the drone is, I would have loved to have seen a smaller remote as well, but it's not too bad. It also comes with a battery hub which holds all 3 batteries. The batteries are actually quite light and small, as you'd expect them to be, especially considering that the drone itself is under 250 grams with the battery. The design of the drone itself is very much a DJI-like drone. It fits in the palm of your hand and it's super small. Unfolding it is easy and it seems like a solid little machine. The pack also comes with a bunch of these spare props, so if you love crashing drones, these will be handy, as well as a few spare screws for changing the props and a USB-C cable. For connecting your remote to your device, there's 3 different connecting cables. There's a plastic gimbal cover, which is important, which you'll need to remove before you first fly. The gimbal cover is just like most other drones, and for me, I wish it was sturdier. It certainly does the job and holds the camera and gimbal in its place, and I'm glad it has one. But I can easily see the clips on both of these sides snapping, especially after long and repeated use. This Velcro cover is awesome. I can see it just doing the job time and time again. It's such a simple addition, but it's very unlikely that this is gonna not work for you at some point in the future, whereas the gimbal cover, I can see that snapping. But one thing I didn't mention, which is definitely a feature worth noting, is with the battery hub. Most hubs will charge your batteries one at a time, but this one does all 3 at the same time, which for you, it'll save a ton of time. I also love how you can just plug in a USB-C cable to charge the batteries individually. This whole design is just genius. So in general, my tips for getting the best image or video is to only shoot in very bright conditions when you can, and shoot at the lowest possible ISO. When shooting photos, shoot in RAW. It will maintain the most data in your image. When it comes to shooting video, I would recommend shooting in 4K 30 FPS. Don't use any of the auto white balance or auto exposure settings, as the drone will pick up slightly different lighting conditions and the video will start to flicker both in exposure and the color, and you don't want either of those things. So in my limited time with this Atom drone, I think there's a whole bunch of things that I would suggest for future iterations. I'd love to see an option for vertical shooting. I know a lot of people love to shoot for social media, so a vertical option on this would be amazing. I'd also love to see a remote with a screen, or at least an option to upgrade to a better remote. And perhaps in the future they might be able to release a pro model, where it could just add a whole bunch of things like log shooting, a slightly larger sensor, and a whole bunch of other things that probably don't account for beginner drones. While I may be picky and look for a bunch more things to be added, there's actually quite a bunch of features which I think most beginners are going to love. There's quick shot modes that I don't generally use a lot, but beginners are going to love. But then there's also advanced options like waypoints that most beginners won't ever touch. But when it comes to value, I think there's a lot going for this drone. Clearly Potensic are trying their best to capture the early level drone market with a very solid offer, which I think is a really great thing. So if you're looking for your very first drone, you want it light and simple, for the money, this thing is actually pretty good value.